Hello and welcome to the Breadwinner Podcast. I'm your host, Caroline, and as always, we are here to talk all things sourdough microbakery business. I own a sourdough microbakery. I've been operating from my home for the past 2 years, and I'm currently right in the middle of transitioning from my home to a small storefront bakery in our town. And so I am here to support the small bakers, whether you are baking from your home or a small commercial business. We're talking all about how to make a thriving business that is profitable and that leaves you time for your family and does not burn you out. Before we jump all the way in, I will say if you are one of my YouTube watchers, you probably noticed that the videos have been a little bit laggy. It is a tech issue that I cannot get to the bottom of. I've tried a couple different cameras, changed a lot of settings on my laptop, and I am not sure. I'm not a techie person. I'm a baker, not a video person. And so I am working on it, but bear with me. If the choppiness of the recording drives you crazy, these episodes are also available on all of the audio platforms. So whether you listen on Apple or Spotify or another audio podcast platform, you can just find the Breadwinner podcast over there as well. So if you are a techie person and have some insight, feel free to let me know what might be at the root of my laggy video connection. Bear with me, and we're going to dive into today's episode because it's a really good one. This is one that's been on my to-record list for a while. A lot of times I'll have an episode sort of marinating in my mind and come up with ideas and add it to my list. And so this is one of those. We're talking about markets. And my initial idea was sharing, and continues to be, sharing my best practices, what I've learned. I've regularly sold at the same market for over 2 years now. And I've learned a lot, and I've observed what works really well and what doesn't, both for myself and other vendors. And so I want to share a lot of that. But I also went on Instagram and I invited people to ask questions about markets. And I got a lot of questions. And as I began to organize it, I realized this needs to be more than one episode. And so it's actually going to be 3 episodes. This is part 1 of a 3-part series on markets. And we're going to talk about finding the right fit for a market. So the initial prep, what goes into it before you actually commit to a market. We're going to talk about the actual prep. I had a lot of questions about how to decide how much to bring, the logistics that go into the actual preparing and baking for the market. And then we'll talk about best practices when you're actually there to get the most out of your experience. And so today's episode is part 1 of 3, and we're going to share about finding the right fit. There are a lot of options out there. How do you find the one that's really going to be the best for your business, or more than one? And that's where we will begin today. And before we dive in, I want to let you know that this series is brought to you by the Breadwinner Holiday Accelerator. This is a fully online event for bakers just like you at the end of October. So October 28th and 29th. It's a 2-day quick little moment to hit pause, to take a deep breath, reset after October, which is often a busy month, and then regroup, recharge to approach November and December with a clear plan so that you don't spread yourself too thin, say yes to everything, and find yourself burnt out by the end of November, as I did my first year, or just worn out and burnt out by the end of December. Rather, this is going to help you create financial and business goals, as well as balance that with the needs and commitments and desires of your holiday season on your household and just family and life side, and give you those strategies. So it's a free event. There is an optional upgrade for your ticket if you want long-term access to the recordings and some neat bonuses. I'm sharing 3 of the base recipes that I've developed that are some of my top selling favorite products. My muffins, my scones base recipe, I get asked about that a lot, and then my granola. And it will come with a guide on how you can tweak those base recipes. So for holiday flavors, you can add and adjust the flavorings, and you'll receive a guide with your upgraded ticket on how to do that. It's going to be a really neat thing. I'm really excited for this accelerator. We are about 2 weeks out, and about 200 bakers have already grabbed their ticket, and a lot of them are going ahead and adding that upgraded ticket to get the most out of the event. You can sign up and grab your ticket at carolinebauer.com/holiday accelerator, or just hit the link down in the show notes. I'm really excited to see you there. But for now, let's go ahead and get into today's episode. Let's introduce it by laying the foundation and talking about why markets matter, why they can be a good choice for your business, and why we're even having this conversation. So markets are definitely one of the best ways to grow your sourdough microbakery. They're not the only way. For some people, markets just don't make sense. Especially a lot of my listeners with really little ones don't choose markets at all, if very often. And that makes sense. But if you have the bandwidth, if you have a great local market, this can be a fantastic way to grow your business, especially early on as you are acquiring new customers and trying to reach new people who don't know about you yet. If you become a regular at a local market, this will build visibility, get your name out in the community, and create real relationships with those people who become your regular customers. And you can move them over into a weekly pickup model if you want to kind of lean into the porch pickup, or if you are in a location where your markets are closed for part of the year. I know in a lot of parts of the country, your markets close down in the wintertime, or if you're in somewhere like Arizona, they close in the summer. And so you have to figure out how to make up for that business on the opposite side of the year. And markets can be a great way to build that local clientele, get them on your text list, and help educate them so that they're ready to pick up from you when the market closes. I also love markets because they're a great way to test products and learn what sells, refine your systems. They are the way that usually I test new offerings rather than offering something new on my pre-order list. I will often bring just a handful to a market. And anytime someone I know purchases it, I let them know, this is new. I'd love your feedback. When you come back next week, let me know what you think. And sometimes they'll just text me right away and tell me what they thought. It's a great way to determine for me whether or not I should keep on bringing that new product. It's really fun to see firsthand which items make people stop and line up and which ones they just ignore and you can probably skip next time. But the fact is that not all markets are created equal. They reach different people, they're organized differently, they attract different vendors. So that is where a lot of bakers, myself included, have wasted time signing up for every market with an open booth just to get their name out there. Whereas we're going to talk about how to identify the markets that have the highest likelihood of being a great fit for you. So when you are trying to choose the right market, the first thing to think about is local. It's really important to show up in front of the same audience who would pick up from you during the week if you had regular pickups. There can be great market opportunities in maybe a town far away from you, and maybe it would be a great cash infusion for one day, but in reality, that time might be used better at a more local market that reaches your regular people. Or you could consider a one-off if it's a holiday event with a great turnout and they need a baker and it's far away from you. But that's a really important consideration. Are you going to be reaching the people who are close enough in proximity to pick up from you during the week if and when you have regular pickup? I found that markets really work best when you're reinforcing your presence in your actual community rather than going 45 minutes or an hour to reach a totally different audience. A great way to find local markets is to just get online. A lot of times there are local Facebook groups specifically for vendor events. If you search in Facebook groups and look for like farmers markets near me, vendor events, things like that. Those groups are very hit or miss, and not every market in there is going to be for you, but that can be a great place to get started. As you are looking and researching, and once you start seeing these markets and clicking on them, the next thing to do is to take a look at the market's social media presence. So are they posting regularly? Is it just the recycled Canva template that they're using every single week and not really changing anything besides the date? Or are they actually highlighting their vendors? Are they resharing their vendors' posts? Are they building community? Do you see local shoppers commenting on the market's posts? Those are all really good signs that they have an engaged community locally, and you are likely to be reaching people who are excited to come to the market each week. If you're seeing a market where every single post is more or less the same exact template, the same exact image, just with the date being changed, and there's no engagement, you're not seeing much from other local vendors, that can be a sign that the organization, the management of the market is going to be a little bit more difficult to work with. This is not a blanket statement across the board. There are always exceptions, but in my experience, the more work and effort and intentionality the organizer is putting in, the better the experience is going to be for the vendors, and customers pick up on that too. If the vendors love the market, the customers notice. Whereas if the vendors are like frustrated, if it's disorganized, if they don't have a great experience with the organizers, the customers pick up on that energy. The next thing to pay attention to when you're looking for a new market is consistency. So markets that run on a regular, predictable schedule, like every Saturday or every first Sunday or every second and fourth Saturday, those are gold because customers build habits around them. So when you become a regular vendor, they start expecting you. They know where to find you, and that predictability builds trust. I always encourage people who are considering a market to find one where you can become a long-term staple there, where people know you are always going to be there. I love that I get to say about my market, I am always here. I have my spot. People know exactly where to come to find me. I'm kind of hidden in the back behind the barn, but they know where to look for me. I am always there every second and fourth Saturday. And so people know, and they come back and they plan ahead and they anticipate it. And they get up early on Saturday mornings because they know that you're going to be there. Another key is to talk to other vendors. This is so helpful. If you're scoping out markets and you're not a vendor there yet, you can go chit chat with the vendors as just a customer. Go buy something for them, support them, chat with them, and ask them a couple questions. Say, hey, what is your experience with this market? Are you a regular here? How long have you been selling? Are the customers pretty loyal? You are not looking for gossip. I find it's really easy for vendors to start gossiping with each other, especially if you have a booth and you're just hanging out next to each other for 4 or 6 hours. I see a lot of gossip, and that is not the strategy, but rather just chat with your vendor neighbor. You can learn how they feel about the management, what their experience is, how applications are, if it's easy to navigate. Does the management communicate well? Are they easy to get in touch with if there's an issue? Are they fairly flexible if you have something come up? How much are they sticklers for their policies? Honestly, you want a management who's going to be a stickler for their policies, to be very clear on what they say yes and no to, and to enforce it consistently with every vendor. That builds trust with the vendors. It builds a consistent experience for your customers, and that's a good sign. Management should be friendly and warm and community-oriented, but they should also have high standards. I interviewed my market manager last year, and so if you scroll back, we'll link that down in the show notes. I don't know off the top of my head which episode number that was, but I interviewed Ashley, who runs my market, and she's one of those who's a stickler. She knows her policies and she's clear on them. She communicates them well, and she runs her market so beautifully. And so our regular customers come back repeatedly and they know what to expect and they love it. So I recommend listening to that one too. There's a little bit of repetition in that episode with this one, but Ashley's insights are really helpful. So anyway, getting back on track, as you're chatting with other vendors, whether you're set up in a booth next to them or just filling out a market as a customer first, ask them about the management, ask them about the customers, the foot traffic. Is it fairly steady? Does it vary a lot? What kind of shoppers are they seeing? Are they people who come out regularly every week for their pantry cooking staples? Are they repeat customers? And also, are the vendors repeats? Do you have a lot of the same vendors who are coming back week after week as regulars? Or is there a lot of turnover? Some turnover is absolutely normal, but if you see a lot of regulars, that's also a really good sign because, again, that is showing that the vendors like that market, and the customers can come back and have a really predictable experience. So along the same lines of the customers, you want to really understand who is shopping there. So depending on where you live, you might be in an area that's attracting a lot of tourists, a lot of browsers. If it's more of a craft market than like a farmer's market, you might find that there's a lot of customers who are just sort of window shopping and not actually there to purchase their food for the week. If you can find one where the locals are coming out to do their weekly shopping, that is really great. What I found is that the people who come through right when we open at 9 and the ones who are there from about 9 to 10 or so, those are the local regulars. They're coming through to pick up their eggs, their honey, their produce, their bread for the week. And then there's more of the kind of browsers as the day goes on, people who are driving by and stop in or saw a social media post and wanted to swing in. And it's normal to have a mix. So if people are coming out there for food, that's a pretty good indicator that you're going to have some steady sales. You can count on people who want to shop locally and they're not just there for entertainment. If it is kind of more of an entertainment type market, which a lot of times the one-offs like the holiday events tend to be more entertainment oriented, more craft oriented, that could be more of a marketing opportunity. If it's still reaching your local audience, but it's a one-time event rather than something ongoing, you can approach that as a way to just get in front of people. Maybe you share samples. Maybe you have something that they can take with them, a printout, even like $5 off your next purchase or something like that. I've done some of those in the past, especially when I was getting started, and they were really beneficial just in terms of getting in front of people who wouldn't see me otherwise. Or I had a very strong Facebook presence, especially in the beginning. And once people saw me, they were like, "Oh, I see you on Facebook." And that clicked and that just deepened the connection of who I am. And they were able to put a face to the name and it built trust. There are still a lot of people 2 years in who come to me at the market booth and say, "I shopped from you back at the Christmas market in 2023. And they remember and they've made that connection. So those events, I'm not saying don't do one-off events at all. Do them strategically and have a plan to make the most of it. But those tend to be more for marketing rather than a huge sellout event most of the time. So I said that I invited some questions. I had some really good ones, and we're going to include a few of them here. So the first question that someone asked is whether I got my supplies before I signed up for my first market or if I signed up and then started to accumulate my supplies. And what I did and what I would recommend is I just used what I had. I already had a folding table. I had a pop-up canopy and I had a tablecloth. And that's all I started with. I had one of those collapsible cooling racks for my display as well as a basket that I had around the house. It was really minimal. One table, no frills. I did print off a little sign from Canva that told a little bit about sourdough and put it in a picture frame that I already had. And then just slowly over time, I built up my setup. As it made sense, I changed my display a little bit. I added a table here and there and added signage, but I didn't do all of that all at once. So I recommend the same to you. Just start with what you have. If you need a table, if you need a canopy, those are going to be investments that you will use over and over. So that makes sense to start with those must-haves. I also like just a folding stool. Walmart has them for not very much. I think they're under $20. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. We're going to talk more about this in part 3, but I like to sit on a stool rather than a low chair. And so I think I don't know if I already had that or if I bought that for my first market, but little things like that are things that you'll use for long term. But in terms of display, just start with what you have. Another question that comes up a lot is what if there's already another sourdough baker at the market? This is something that everyone asks. I've heard it so many times. I've certainly talked about it in other episodes, but it totally makes sense to touch on it in this episode as well. What I found is that a little bit of overlap is not a bad thing. Depending on the market, I've seen our market support 2 to 3 sourdough bakers, and currently we have 2 sourdough bakers and several cookie bakers. and they all have enough traffic. The organizer has paid enough attention to know about how many bakers the market can support, and she caps it at a certain spot. So that is something to consider. Does your market cap the bakers at a certain spot? There are 2 sourdough vendors, and we have a fair amount of overlap. Over time, she's kind of made a lot of changes. She started using organic flour and offering some of the products that do really well for me. And so we offer a lot of similar, but we do offer some different products too. And we both have our regulars. We both have the people who keep coming back to us. And I find that we both do great. She doesn't take away from my business, and I don't take away from hers. We both just have our own regular established business. She's closer to the entrance, so she tends to get that kind of initial flow of traffic. And I have more of my regulars who come to the back with me, and people tend to do their rounds and then circle back around to the one that they want to shop with. So I will say there is no way that any one of us bakers can bake for our entire community. No matter if you're in a huge city or a community of 1,000 people, you still can't bake for 1,000 people. We need more than one baker. And if it becomes community rather than competition, ultimately that's going to benefit everyone. And so the other baker and myself, we kind of loosely pay attention to what the other person is offering and respect that. I know that her niche is kind of, her specialty product tends to be cinnamon rolls. And so while I do cinnamon rolls, I usually keep those on my pre-order menu just to respect that's her space. And then if I'm bringing a sweet treat, I tend to go a little bit of a different direction so that we both are differentiated in a certain way. I look for ways to differentiate myself to be a little bit different in my products. And so I put spins on some of the breads that I bake to make them a little bit unique from what we see with other bakers. I think a lot about my customer experience and just ways that I can elevate and stand out. I'm not competing with the other bakers, but I do want to continue to attract new customers and give them a really fabulous experience. And I do that just by staying in my own lane. So this is a long way of saying that having a couple of sourdough bakers is usually totally fine. The sourdough baker who was at the market before the current one, she and I became friends. We would chat after we sold out, and it was really fun to have someone to talk shop with. I haven't really connected in the same way with the current baker, but we're friendly. And I've found that the customers just like having options. A lot of times people will come into my booth carrying her bag, and they grab something from me after getting something different from her, and there's space for all of it. Lean into what you do really well, your unique personality, because you are going to have a business that's entirely different from any other baker. So lean into what sets you apart. Look for bringing in kind of a specialty product that people love and return for. Now, if there are several sourdough bakers in a small market, that can be an indicator that the management isn't really paying attention and isn't filtering who comes in. They're just accepting anyone. And that can be a little bit tricky and lead to dilution of sales if there are just plain too many of the same type in a small market. It'd be a good idea to talk to management if it looks like a market that you really want to try out about product overlap and see if they have any regulations, if they limit what one person brings. That can be a pretty standard practice when you're applying, that they ask you to share all of the products or a general kind of overview of what you'll be bringing so that they can eliminate or minimize overlap to some extent. But to sum it up, in terms of another baker, I think we need more bakers. We need to make access to good locally produced food more readily available. And that a big part of that is sourdough bread. I honestly think sourdough bakers, we are a really important gateway to shifting the tide from people shopping at the big grocery stores to shopping local. People come to the market for their bread because people love bread, and we know that sourdough is a staple and having a moment, but it's not going to fade away. And so once they start coming out for their sourdough bread, they pick up their honey, maybe their eggs, maybe they go get some kale, maybe they grab some salsa. And little by little, they start to make a habit of shopping locally for those things rather than going to the grocery store. So the more the merrier to a certain extent. Certainly, if there's one or two other sourdough bakers in your same market, as long as there's the foot traffic and you both have steady traffic, it's great. All right, the next question is, how do I get new customers at a small market? And this comes down to consistency and connection. Be a regular, be predictable, be trustworthy so that people know where to find you, show up every time, smile, talk to people, create a sense of familiarity. I love that I've learned the names of a lot of my regulars because people buy from faces that they recognize and then they share. Word of mouth is key in growing in a small market. The more that you can connect with people and they trust you and love you and share with their friends, that's going to help you grow. Another thing that's been huge for me in terms of building my local market presence is showing up in local Facebook groups. Especially in the beginning, this was a huge tactic that I utilized. Facebook groups can be hit or miss, but usually there's one or two in your area with high engagement that allow local businesses to share. A lot of times there will be some sort of policies about when you can share and how you formatted it. So just pay attention to that. But I love to share a conversational post. I've shared about this a lot before, but something just inviting conversation, letting local people know who you are, what you offer, but not saying, here's my menu, here's how you order from me, but rather, hey, I'm going to be at the market on Saturday, but I can't decide if I should bring cinnamon bread or cranberry walnut. What do you want to see? And let people vote or let people engage in a conversation. That's going to drive you up in the algorithm. It's going to make people aware of you. Make sure you tag your business Facebook page in there. Highly recommend, if you don't already have a business Facebook page, you're going to make this post from your personal account, but tag your business page on the first line so that people know where to find you, and just invite conversation. Let them know where you are, where to find you, and don't be salesy. And do that over and over. Do it weekly. Do it regularly for a while, and then you can back off if you need to. There came a point where I hit a spot where I did not need additional marketing for a while. I didn't have the capacity to support more customers. I hit the ceiling. And so I backed off on the marketing and just post every month or two just to kind of stay consistent and stay visible. But that Facebook, especially in the beginning, has been key. Other people use Nextdoor similarly and very successfully. I haven't really used it, but I'll be exploring it a little bit down the road as I open my brick and mortar, and I'll share my experience. One other thing that you can do if you are in a small market is considering adding pre-order options or promoting your other pickup days. So rather than relying on this one small market for all of your sales for the week, you can bring the amount of product that you find that the market will support. We're going to talk about that in part 2 of the series. And then use the market primarily as a visibility tool, more than just a pure sales channel. Talk to everyone who comes through, have a warm conversation, and invite them to join your text list so that they can get notified from you when you have a pre-order and they can pick up throughout the week. That way you're not relying on them coming out on Saturdays or whatever your market day is, but you are building up this customer base, this group of people on your list who gets a text from you every week. And so you are top of mind. And as soon as they're ready for sourdough, maybe they're not ready for sourdough at that market, but when they're ready, they know you because you text them every week and they're going to order from you. So getting new customers at a small market, just recap, I love Facebook for that, but also word of mouth, and just be regular, be predictable, and consider adding pre-orders, whether it's pre-orders that they pick up at the market or whether you promote your pre-orders at the market for pickup on another day. Those are both ways that you can kind of build your customer base using that market traffic. So quick recap, If you are evaluating markets right now, here's your short checklist. So look for one that's local, stay local to your ideal customers, look for active community-oriented management, prioritize consistency and habit building, talk to the other vendors for real feedback, get a feel for how they like the market, and even if there's another local market that they love and recommend, and then match your goals to the customer base. So if it's a local customer base who's out there for groceries, then your goal should be to put that bread in their hands. If it's more of a browser customer base, but they're still local, your goal should be visibility. Let them know who you are, how to order from you, where to find you regularly, and use it as a marketing tool. So when you do this groundwork, your market days will become smoother, more profitable, more enjoyable, less stressful, less mysterious. And you can make the most of those opportunities. If you want help planning your holiday markets and choosing the right ones, preparing your production calendar, setting your menu, things like that, join me inside the Holiday Accelerator. We talked about that at the beginning. We're going to map out a plan for November, December so that you can sell confidently without burning out, maximize the opportunities, but say no to the right things. So grab your free ticket at carolinebauer.com/holiday accelerator, or just hit the link down in the show notes. And then next week, we're going to move on to part 2 of this series, where we are going to answer a lot of the questions that I received about my exact plan. How do I know what to prepare? What is my workflow for baking and prepping? And we are going to really dive into the nitty-gritty of deciding how much to bring, streamlining your prep systems, and making your bake day feel doable for a sustainable regular market schedule. I'm excited for that one. It's going to be really great. So I'll see you soon. But until then, happy baking.